Tea was chamomile. It always was. My husband made it every night without being asked. Brought it upstairs on a little wooden tray with a shortbread cookie on the side, the way I liked. 22 years of marriage, and he never missed a night. I thought that meant love. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. This was 1987. I was 61 now, sitting on the back porch of my house in Kelowna, watching the lake. The same lake I've looked at every morning for the past 19 years since I moved here after everything fell apart and rebuilt itself again. I think about that chamomile tea more than I probably should, not with bitterness anymore, just with a kind of stunned clarity that only comes with distance. But let me start where it actually started. With my daughter. She was 9 years old that September, and she had my mother's eyes, dark, serious, the kind that missed nothing. We called her our little owl because she was always watching, always quietly taking things in before she spoke. She wasn't a dramatic child. She wasn't given to scenes or stories. So when she knocked on the bathroom door while I was getting ready for bed on a Tuesday night and said, "Mom, I need to tell you something about Dad," I put down my cold cream and I listened. She sat on the edge of the tub. She was wearing her nightgown with the little yellow ducks on it. She looked at her hands for a long moment before she looked up at me. "Dad has a different phone," she said. "A small black one. He keeps it in the zipper part of his hockey bag." I told her she was probably thinking of his pager. Her father was a civil engineer with a firm in Vancouver. He had a pager for work. He'd had one for years. She shook her head. "It's not the pager. This one is a phone. I saw him talking on it in the garage 2 weeks ago. He didn't know I was there." He said she stopped, pressed her lips together. He said she doesn't know anything, she never does, and then he laughed. I remember the specific feeling in my chest at that moment. Not alarm, not yet. More like a loose thread you notice on a sweater. You don't pull it, you just notice it's there. "People say things on the phone that don't mean what they sound like," I told her. I believed that. I needed to believe that. Her father was the kind of man other men respected. Quiet, capable, did the dishes without being asked. We had a good life. A Burnaby split level, 2 cars in the driveway, camping trips to Manning Park every summer. I was a dental hygienist, part-time by then, because we didn't need the money. That was something he'd arranged deliberately. I understand that now too. She nodded at what I said, but she didn't look convinced and she didn't move from the edge of the tub. "There's more," she said. She'd been writing things down. In a little notebook she kept between her mattress and the box spring, the kind of slim notepad you get at Zeller's with a cartoon on the cover. She'd been writing dates and times. My 9-year-old daughter had been keeping a log. He took the phone calls in the garage, usually after 9. He sometimes left early on Fridays saying he had a site inspection in Abbotsford and didn't come back until Sunday evening. He told her once, when I wasn't around, that "Mommy gets tired a lot, doesn't she?" And the way he said it bothered her. She couldn't explain why. Just that it bothered her. She handed me the notebook. I sat on the edge of that tub for a long time after she went back to bed. The following morning, a Thursday, I did something I had never done in 22 years of marriage. I went into the garage while he was in the shower, and I unzipped the side pocket of his hockey bag. The phone was there. Small, black, a Nokia. Prepaid. I put it back exactly as I found it, went inside, made coffee. When he came downstairs, I handed him his mug and asked about his day. He said he had a meeting in New Westminster and might be late. He kissed me on the cheek and left. I called my sister. She was the practical one, always had been. Lived in Victoria, worked as a paralegal for a family law firm, which turned out to be either very lucky or very devastating, depending on how you look at it. I told her everything, the phone, the notebook, the things my daughter had written down, the particular way he'd said she never does. There was a long pause on the line. "How much life insurance do you have on each other?" she asked. I didn't know offhand. It was the kind of thing he'd always handled. He handled the finances, the investments, the insurance. I handled the household, the kids, the appointments. We'd divided things that way without ever formally deciding to. I thought that was just how marriages worked. She told me to find the policy documents. I told her I thought they were in the filing cabinet in the basement. They were. $2 million. On my life. Taken out 14 months earlier. We'd always carried some coverage, Both of us, moderate amounts, the sensible kind. This was different. I stood in that basement in my housecoat holding the folder, and I felt something shift under me, like the floor of a house that looks perfectly solid from the outside, but has been quietly rotting from below for longer than anyone knew. I called my sister back. "Don't say anything to him," she said immediately. "Don't change anything. Act normal." "Can you act normal?" I said I thought so. "I need a few days," she said. She used those days well. She had a colleague at the firm, a woman who did investigative work, mostly asset searches and infidelity cases in the context of divorce proceedings. My sister explained the situation without using names. The investigator agreed to help quietly. By the following Monday, we knew. His name was on a lease agreement for a condo in North Vancouver. Had been for 3 years. A woman named, I'll call her by her first initial because she was a victim too and deserves some privacy. A woman named T had been living there with her young son, a boy who was 4 years old at the time. The boy's birth certificate, which the investigator obtained through records she had access to, listed my husband as the father. He had a son, 4 years old, living 40 minutes away. I sat with that fact for 2 full days before I could do anything else. I went through the regular motions, made breakfast, drove carpool, did laundry, and I just held that piece of information inside me like a stone I couldn't put down. On Wednesday, my sister drove over from the ferry terminal. She sat across from me at my kitchen table and she said, "There's something else." T worked part-time and received monthly payments from him, wire transfers from an account I hadn't known existed, through a credit union in North Van. He'd been moving money there gradually for years, not in amounts large enough to trigger questions, just steadily, quietly. My sister's colleague estimated somewhere between $180,000 and $220,000 over the course of the relationship, money from our joint savings, from his salary, from the investment account he managed for our future. He was building a different future. He just needed me to stop existing in this one first. I said that out loud at the kitchen table, and hearing it come out of my own mouth was the strangest thing. Not because it was dramatic, because it was so plain, so completely ordinary in its horror. "What do you want to do?" my sister asked. I looked out the window at our backyard, at the swing set he'd built the summer before. "I want proof," I said. He'd built the summer before. "I want proof," I said. "Real proof. The kind that holds up." My sister knew a retired RCMP officer through the firm, a man who had spent years on organized crime cases and then gone private. She called him that night. He came to the house the next morning while my husband was at work and my daughter was at school. He was a compact, unhurried man, the kind who makes you feel like things are going to proceed in an orderly way. He walked through the house, through the garage, looked at the filing cabinet. He sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and laid out what he thought we should do. Not a confrontation, not a scene. Evidence first, then movement. He placed a small audio recorder, looked like a car key fob, in the garage near the workbench where my husband took his calls. We also put one in the home office, tucked behind the row of binders on the bookshelf. Both were voice-activated. Then I waited. I was very good at waiting, it turned out. Better than I would have expected from myself. I took things 1 hour at a time. I made dinner. I watched television. I accepted the chamomile tea every night and poured it down the bathroom sink after he fell asleep. That was what my daughter had remembered, actually, and what finally set me looking in the first place. Not just the phone, not just the notebook, but something she said when she was handing me that notebook. "Mom," she said, "don't drink your tea." I'd asked her why. I saw Dad put something in it. I was on the stairs and I could see through the kitchen doorway. He opened one of those little capsules and put the powder in before he brought it up. She'd been sitting on those stairs in the dark, in her duck nightgown, watching her father doctor my tea, for 3 weeks before she worked up the nerve to tell me. 9 years old. On the 4th day after the recorder went in, it caught something. My husband in the garage just after 10 at night. "She's not going to be a problem much longer. I've been thinking about the long weekend. We could do the cabin. She can't hike worth a damn, and the trails get narrow up there. People slip. It happens." A pause. Then, "The policy's been active long enough. 14 months, T. 14 months is clean." Her voice, faint through the speaker, asking about the boy, whether things would change after. And him saying yes, that he was done managing 2 lives, that it was time to simplify. Time to simplify. I remember sitting at the kitchen table listening to that recording on the little handheld device the investigator left for me and thinking, I actually thought of my daughter's notebook, the careful way she wrote the dates in her 9-year-old printing. She'd been trying to protect me, months of sitting on stairs in the dark watching, writing things down. I called my sister, then the investigator, then a lawyer she knew who handled these situations with what she called the right kind of discretion. The long weekend he'd mentioned was Thanksgiving. 2 weeks away. We spent those 2 weeks building a case that would survive a courtroom. The investigator worked with my sister's colleague to document the North Vancouver condo, the credit union account, the transfers. A forensic accountant, my sister located through the firm, traced the money trail in detail. Dates, amounts, the pattern of the transfers matching dates when he'd told me we were tightening the belt. I'd actually believed him. I'd cut back on things. I remembered feeling quietly proud of myself for not complaining. The audio recordings went to the RCMP on a Monday. An officer my sister's contact vouched for personally, senior, experienced, the kind who wouldn't mishandle something this delicate. The warrant came through by Thursday. I wasn't there when they arrested him. I'd taken my daughter to my mother's house in Coquitlam that morning, told her we were visiting for a few days, that I needed some help with a project. My mother was 84 then, still sharp, and she looked at me for a long moment when I arrived, and then she just said, "Whatever it is, you'll handle it." She'd always said things like that, short and certain, as if she simply knew. He was arrested at a job site in Richmond at 2:30 in the afternoon. Attempted conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, bigamy. He'd married T in a private ceremony in Whistler 18 months before, which meant he'd committed that crime while legally married to me. The investigator later told me he'd probably planned to let me die first, claim the insurance, and then discover the marriage to T had been technically invalid and remarry her properly. He'd thought of most things, just not our daughter on the stairs. T, when police contacted her, was at the condo with the boy. She was 29 years old. She'd met him at a work function, believed he was separated, believed the North Van life was their real life, and that he was resolving a complicated divorce. When they told her she'd been part of an active bigamy for 18 months and explained what had been planned, she sat down on her kitchen floor and didn't get up for several minutes. An officer told my sister's contact that later. I've always thought about that detail, her on that floor, realizing she and I never spoke directly. I didn't need that, and I don't think she did either. But through the legal proceedings, through what her own lawyer communicated and what came out in the trial, I understood she hadn't known. She trusted a man who gave her every reason to believe him, the same way I had years before her. The trial was in the spring. Provincial Supreme Court in Vancouver. He had a good lawyer, corporate type, expensive, kept trying to argue the recordings were ambiguous, that the money transfers were gifts, that the insurance policy was just prudent financial planning. The Crown was better. They were methodical and thorough, and they had 14 months of financial records, 2 voice recordings, a toxicology report. Because yes, the capsule residue my daughter saw him use turned out to be something real. They found trace evidence of a sedative compound in the teacup I'd preserved and handed over, unwashed, in a Ziploc bag, and the testimony of a 9-year-old girl who sat in that witness box and answered every question in a clear, steady voice and did not look once at her father. I watched her from the gallery. I don't think I breathed the whole time she was up there. He was convicted on all counts, sentenced to 18 years. With parole eligibility, he'd serve 11 at minimum. We moved to Kelowna that August, far enough from Burnaby to start fresh, close enough to my mother that I could still make the drive to Coquitlam in under 4 hours when she needed me, which became more frequent as the years went on. My daughter grew up here, mostly. Did her schooling here, left for university in Edmonton, came back to British Columbia eventually. She lives in Kamloops now, 40 minutes up the highway, which suits us both. She's a social worker. Works primarily with families in crisis. I've always thought the two things are connected, though she's never said so directly, being more private than me. She came for dinner last Sunday. Brought her partner and their dog, a large, ridiculous animal who takes up most of the porch. We sat outside after the meal and watched the light change over the lake, and she said, out of nowhere, "Do you ever think about how different things would have been if I hadn't seen him in the kitchen that night?" I said yes. I think about it more than she knows. I almost didn't say anything, she told me. I thought maybe I'd made a mistake, that maybe it was just vitamins or something and I'd get in trouble for spying. She was 9. She talked herself into doubt the way children do when they're afraid to upset the people they love. And then she talked herself back out of it, sat down at her little desk and wrote the date and time in her notepad and told herself she'd watch again tomorrow, and the day after that, and that when she was sure she'd say something. I reached across the table and held her hand. You were the bravest person in that house, I said. She made a face, the way she does when she's uncomfortable with direct emotion. I was just paying attention, she said. That's the thing though, isn't it? Paying attention is the brave part. It's the part most of us learn to stop doing because it's easier, because it's more comfortable, because the alternative is a truth we don't feel ready to hold. He was released 2 years ago. He's somewhere in Alberta now, under conditions that prohibit contact with me or our daughter. I got the notification from Correctional Service Canada the morning of his release date. I made myself a cup of tea, proper tea, the kind I choose myself, and I sat on his porch and watched the water, and I thought, well, here we both are, on opposite sides of everything. T did eventually reach out, through a mutual legal channel, about 4 years after the trial, not to relitigate anything, just to say she'd rebuilt her life, that her son was doing well, that she hoped I had too. I wrote back. It was a short letter. I wish them both genuinely well. I meant it. Her son is almost 40 now, if my arithmetic is right. He never knew his father during the years that mattered. I think about that sometimes too. How many lives got bent out of shape by one man who decided his convenience was worth more than other people's entire existence, but the lives got rebuilt. That matters. My daughter will call me tomorrow morning, the way she does most mornings, usually from the car on her way to work. She'll complain about the traffic on the Coquihalla and ask if I've eaten breakfast and tell me something funny her partner said. I'll drink my tea, real tea, my choice, and listen to her voice and think, the way I always do, about a small girl in a duck nightgown, sitting on dark stairs, watching, waiting, working up the courage to knock on her mother's bathroom door and say, I need to tell you something. She saved my life. She doesn't quite see it that way. She says she just told me what she saw. Maybe that's all any of us can do. See what's actually in front of us, and then be honest enough to say it out loud, even when we're 9 years old and frightened. Even when we're 61 and looking back at a version of ourselves who almost didn't look under the hockey bag. Look. Tell someone. Get safe. The rest somehow finds a way to follow. I've had a long time to think about what actually happened in that house. Not the events. I've turned those over enough times that the edges are worn smooth, but the mechanics underneath them. Why it unfolded the way it did. What made the difference? My husband was careful and patient and intelligent. He'd spent years constructing something that looked from every angle like a normal life. He understood that the best way to keep a person from seeing clearly is to make them comfortable. Comfortable people don't check hockey bags. They don't lie awake wondering. They accept the tea because the tea has always been there and the person who brings it has always seemed like someone who loves them. He nearly got away with it. Not because he was exceptional, but because I was willing. I wanted the life to be what it looked like. That willingness was something he counted on, and he was right to count on it. Right up until the night a 9-year-old girl sat on dark stairs and watched him open a capsule over my cup. She didn't look away. That's the thing I come back to most often. She was frightened, she was a child, and she didn't know what she was seeing. But something in her understood that looking away would be a choice she couldn't take back. So she watched. And then she wrote it down. And then, weeks later, she knocked on a bathroom door. What she did wasn't complicated. It wasn't heroic in any dramatic sense. It was just honest. She saw something. She held on to it carefully, and she told the truth about it to someone she trusted. That's the whole of it. I think about the version of events where she'd talked herself out of it, where she'd decided she was probably wrong, that she'd get in trouble, that it would upset people she loved. Children do that constantly. We all do, well into adulthood. We have a clear sight line to something uncomfortable, and we find reasons to look elsewhere because the looking costs something and we're not sure we're up for paying it. She paid it anyway. At 9 years old, she paid it, And because she did, I had the chance to pay my own cost, going into that garage, finding that phone, making that call to my sister. Each of those things required me to accept that the truth might be something I didn't want. Every step was a small act of courage that built on the one before it, starting with hers. My sister did what she does. She was methodical. She asked the right questions. She found the right people. The investigator did his job carefully and without dramatics. The Crown did theirs. Everyone in that chain did their part because someone at the very beginning of it chose not to look away. That's what I mean when I say it wasn't any one thing that saved me. It was a sequence. And sequences have to start somewhere. She started it. A child with a cartoon notepad and a very quiet kind of bravery. I think the world underpays that kind of bravery because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't look like much from the outside. It looks like a little girl sitting on stairs in the dark. But that's exactly where it happens. In the quiet moment when you know something true and you have to decide whether you're going to carry it or set it down. Carry it. Even when it's heavy, especially then. Because the people who need to hear it are usually the people who matter most to you, and they deserve the truth more than you deserve the comfort of staying silent. I learned to swim properly at 63. It took me a summer and more chlorine than I care to remember. My daughter thought it was the funniest thing she'd ever witnessed. And also, I could tell, one of the things she was most proud of me for. We don't talk about it in grand terms. We don't need to. We just know what it cost to get to that pool. And what it means that we're both still here to laugh about it.